Managing time for your postgraduate studies. Reflection. In our previous conversation, I introduced you to the metaphor of summiting Kilimanjaro, the majestic mountain of East Africa. You need time to summit. You must manage time when you summit. You also need to reflect on how you are managing your time as you summit. When people summit, they have got time frames. They will say, we want to summit in a month or in 3 weeks. Therefore, as they summit, they must continuously reflect also on how they are managing their time, but also what is it that is impacting on their time. It could be the weather changes, it could be the fatigue, it could be the health, it could be that maybe as a team they are not cooperating. Therefore, it's important that at this time of your studies, you also need to reflect like a team of people who are summiting on what is your experiences of how you have been managing your time so far. Your reflection on time management. As you reflect on how you have been managing your time, you also need to think about what is it that is making it difficult for you to manage your time. Because there could be a number of aspects. Is it because you are not ready with your studies? Is it because of other factors outside you? It could also be your own institution. Maybe how things are being communicated. Maybe you have registered late. Maybe you are not really familiarized on how to use like online system, and that's taking you time. But then you also need to think about what do you need to do differently to manage your time. Reflection questions to focus on what you did before when you could manage time academically. It's important to always have a reference point, because as you are doing your postgraduate studies, you have been studying, you did your undergraduate qualification. It doesn't matter whether you studied in a full-time university or in a part-time university. The fact is that at some stage you could manage your time, and we need to reflect on what is it that you were doing at that moment where you felt you could manage your time. Why is it important to manage time? You know, we emphasize time management in your studies. It is important because time management is identified as one of the academic performance marker. In order to succeed in your studies, it is important that you manage your time. You might be highly intelligent, you might not have challenges with your work, but if you struggle to manage your time, it might impact on you. Sometimes you might still be able to pass, but your average might be lower than what you are capable of, because you are not giving yourself enough time to familiarize yourself with the content. We must also understand that time management is not only important for you to pass in your qualification. It is also one of the graduate attributes that each and every graduate must develop in order to manage in their career. You know, when you finish with your studies, if you are working and you are hoping for further career development, when you have got a senior position or in any employment, it is important that you manage your time. Because if you don't manage your time, then you submit projects late. You also do not serve your customers or your clients on time, which has got a negative impact on your career and your profession. Also, if you manage your time, it also helps you in negotiating boundaries in relationships. Sometimes people do not take us serious or do not trust us because we can't manage our time. So this is not an issue that is important only for your academics, but it's also an interpersonal need that you need to manage in order to manage boundaries in relationships. Some people have got this assumption that if you respect me and you respect our relationships and you respect me as a person, you will also respect the time that we negotiate that we are going to meet at this particular time. So struggling with time communicate a lot about how you view that particular relationship. You also need time to think. If you can't give yourself time to think and to reflect, you then struggle with uncertainty. You keep on feeling like you are floating and you are just running from one thing to another. But reflection helps you to feel contained. And if you take your time to think, you can even manage your life much better. You can even manage feelings of discomfort and uncertainty and chaos. As we continue talking about managing your time, you also need to think about what is it, the support you need to be able to manage your modules more effectively. And that might mean you have to think inside and outside UNISA. Who will you ask for support? It's also very hard to know who will you ask for support if you don't even have time to engage or to reflect, as I said previously. But with issue of time, it's also linked to where and when will you study. That's something you need to be conscious. It needs to be intentional because you are creating time to study, and therefore you are also embracing that studying is very important, and I therefore deserve or I need to claim my time to study. You also need to think about different possibilities. Can you study at night, since during the day you are distracted? If you are working, most of the people are going back to the offices. Can you arrive at work early and you start studying? Or can you stay later and you focus on your studies? Can you go to the office on weekend so that you can study? So it's important that you take time to interrogate all these aspects because they help you to understand and claim your time to study. With time, you need preparation. You need preparation to make time for your postgraduate studies. Look at how you are currently spending your time and think about which activities will you need to spend less time on to have enough time on your studies. If you don't prepare, if you don't internalize the fact that you are studying and you realize that your studies, your postgraduate studies must be your priority. So every time you are thinking about any other commitment, you actually need to think about how does this impact on my plan for my studies. That's your negotiation point. When you are talking to other people, when you want to make other commitments, you have to think about how will this take time for my studies. When you are thinking about making time for your postgraduate studies, you also need to think about, have you budgeted enough time for your studies? Imagine if you are summiting Kilimanjaro and you are thinking you're going to summit for 30 days. You need to think about, do we have enough food? Is the budget for food enough? Is the budget for travel? Is the budget for emergency enough? There are a number of things that you will reflect on. The same applies when we are thinking about time for your studies. You really need to think, have I really allocated enough time for my studies? And there have been research that have been done with suggestions on how we can allocate time. Of course, this varies from one individual to the other. Some people might need more time. Some people might need less time. But this is an average to say if you really want to succeed in your studies, if you really want to have time to internalize and have depth in your learning, this is what is recommended. It is recommended that if you are studying full time, you have at least 40 hours available per week. You need to ask yourself now, how will you allocate the time? You could spread out the 40 hours over 5 or 7 days, depending on your circumstances. We must remember this is a recommendation. It's not meant to overwhelm you and to start being anxious that I can't make it. This is just a suggestion to help you start thinking about the time you need to study and to understand you really need time to study. If you really want to get into the rhythm that allows you to cover all the modules every week, and when we say all the modules every week, we are looking at the following components. You are able to read, you are able to make notes and completing assignment, because these are important components of preparing for your exams. If you are studying part-time, your hours per week study budget is restricted because of the commitments that you have. Therefore, you need to look at the 7 days of the week where you can carve time out for study and stick to those times, because a steady work pace is key to progress. You will either get up early or study after others have gone to sleep. As I suggested earlier, if you are working, it could also mean that every day you just budget to be in the office an hour earlier, and you can spend an hour with your studies. You can then also say every day after work, I will stay for 2 hours. That will contribute towards you managing time and also managing your workload. As we talk about preparation, my experience is that one of the things that really impact on our time or on our studies is that we don't really make space for our postgraduate studies. Remember, if you are doing distance learning, your bedroom will be your campus, especially if you don't have, the luxury of a study room or another empty room that you could use for your studies. Or even the kitchen could be your campus. It means that's the place that you will use to study. You just need a desk, or sometimes you might not even have a desk. Whatever that space is, ideally it should be as personal and private as possible. A place where you are comfortable and you are connected to your studies. This means that you really need to think about where will that be space for you. It could be a garage. It could be your bedroom. But you need to feel comfortable and quite focused when you are studying. As you create and negotiate your space, think about what you need. Do you need a quiet space with very few distractions? Is this space not readily available at home? Where will you study? You could then think, can I negotiate with the school? Can I negotiate with the church if there is no library? So this is about thinking outside of the boundaries, being creative to say, earlier on we spoke about who do you need to support you. It could be you need a church to support you, where you need to negotiate with the local pastor to say, can I study in your church? Can I study at the school? We are talking about negotiating for support, negotiating for space. You need to understand that in order to succeed in your studies, it's not only dependent on your own efforts. You need other people such as your family, your employer, and friends. Negotiating the support of others means that you will help the people in your life understand the demands of open distance learning, and that you will communicate your challenges, success, and needs in terms of your studies. You must, however, remember that negotiation is a give and take situation. You also have to think about what can you give back to those who support you. For example, if you are going to use the church as your library, you could offer that you will clean the church. This can range from giving others feedback about your study process, spending time with them when you are not studying, and including them when you reward yourself from your success. You really need to think about what type of support do you need personally in order to cope differently for the rest of the year. It is important that when we think about negotiating support, we also need to take responsibility. If you don't communicate your needs, other people will not know how to support you. You need to take responsibility to inform them. We have got a tendency sometimes to say, these people don't understand. They don't understand because they have never been informed. Thank you. You can reach us on counseling@unisa.ac.za. You can also log into our website so that you can have more resources that could help you to manage your studies more effectively. Thank you.